Hi, my name is Janelle James, and today I will be interviewing Kelli Etchison about her newest appointment to the Black Leadership Advisory Board. Thank you so much, Ms. Etchison, for joining us today, and congratulations on your appointment to the Black Leadership Advisory Council.
Thank you.
So, what was your reaction when you found out Governor Gretchen Whitmer appointed you to the council?
I was incredibly humbled, surprised. I mean, especially when you learn the sheer numbers of more than 650 people, talented people across this great state applied. I'm like, wow. Yeah, it was incredibly humbling. And it was a culmination of a lot of hard work over my career that was like, yeah, thank you. This is awesome. Thank you, Lord.
Speaking of your career, how has your experience as Chief Diversity Officer at LASCU made you qualified for this role?
Well, so I'll say at LAFQ, just my sheer experience, the Chief Diversity Officer role is newer since August. And, but I would say my life experience is made me qualified for this role. I've been Dr. Martin Luther King Commissioner, Dr. Martin Luther King of a commission of Michigan. I've been a commissioner there for a number of years. And I've now on the East Lansing Police Oversight Study Commission. And so there's a lot of things that have played into this moment that has made me, I feel very qualified. I tell people, I feel like I'm really called to do not just the work of this Black Leadership Advisory Council that the governor has appointed me to, but the diversity, equity, and inclusion work that I'm doing, and just things that have happened in my life, and just the things that as Black people, when we show up as Black people and just living our lives, and the racial profiling, and just the oppression, and just the systemic things that we're faced with that we have to just overcome on a daily basis. I think has equipped me very well, for this, the injustices that we're dealing with. The fact that we in Michigan are fighting to get the Crown Act heard, that my hair that grows out of my head in its curly natural state, if I worked for some other company, they could discriminate against me for wearing my hair in its natural state. And just the fact that we can't even get the, legislators on the other side of the aisle to even listen, take it up and hear it, is just absurd to me. So all of these things that shape us over our lives, I feel has made me really qualified for this role.
Is there any event or something that you've experienced in your life that had the greatest impact on how strongly you feel about your activism?
Of course, this summer has shaped a lot of us. And again, as Black people, we've seen the troubling statistics and the things that have been happening in our own communities as it relates to police brutality and so forth. But this summer, I think it just came to a head when people watched for 8 minutes and 48 seconds a man's life literally take his last breath, cry for his mother. That just ripped you to your core. And so there were instances that had been happening in my life. And the last time that I was racially profiled myself was a year ago in September. That was the beginning of, I need to do something. I need to have a conversation, like a community conversation or something. What can I do to impact change? What can I do to bring some light to what is going on in our communities. And then life still happens, and you still get busy and things get put on the back burner. And while I wanted to do that last fall, after that last incident with me in September, things happened in my life, so things got busy. And then when this happened with George Floyd, I was like, okay, I felt like I had been tugged at, being called to do something. And I didn't really know what it was going to look like. And so here we go with the chief diversity role, and now this wonderful opportunity to represent Michiganders on what change we can make across our great state. And thankfully, we have a governor that realizes this is important and has put a call to action out there. And there was over 650 people that responded to that call to action.
How do you think your role on the Black Leadership Advisory Council will help the social climate and some may even say civil unrest in Michigan and across the nation?
Yeah, and it definitely is civil unrest, right? And I'm hoping that it will help I definitely am doing it to make an impact. That's what interests me about being part of it, is how can I make an impact? And I believe that it will help. It's going to allow us as a council to look at, laws and policies and practices across the state that are creating all of these systemic barriers that not only carve out a group of people, African American people specifically, from the table of economics, right? So there's this huge wealth gap. And how can we start to address that? How can we start to remove these barriers that have been in play for a very long time that has impacted our community? And, we're born into these zip codes, and we have been redlined for a long time. And how do you start to break free of that when you've got these institutional barriers in place? These are hard. It's like a big, huge ship trying to get it to turn. But I'm confident that the group that the governor has selected, that we will be able to roll up our sleeves, start to uncover and attack and address these things with a lot of thoughtfulness, and where it will actually have some positive impact for the citizens of Michigan.
What type of legislation would you like to see come out of Michigan in regards to helping communities that are racially profiled and face more injustices than other communities?
Yeah, so we definitely have to address in East Lansing, where East Lansing is working toward trying to create some solutions to the problems that they have known that they've had. And across the state, in all of our communities, particularly communities that have a strong Black population, right? What do we do? And so I think looking at legislation that actually keep this economic barrier in play, that we need to look at addressing, and making sure that the policies that are in place that have intentionally, just sheer by the color of someone's skin. I can take this jacket off, but I cannot unzip my skin, right? And so just showing up as a Black person and having barriers in place that are harmful to us, we want to, definitely look at. And so, what legislation do I want to see right now? I don't know. That's part of our work, is that we're going to get in and start looking at what are some of the things that are harming Black communities that we have as laws in our state. One of the things I already talked about at the top of this was, the Crown Act. To have someone that's making a living for their family and have them be terminated from a job. I recall, and I don't remember her name, but I recall just 2 years ago, I think it was a short time ago, where that happened in our community, where, and so that you can have your livelihood taken away from you because of your hair. Mm-hmm. That's a problem. That's an economic challenge for people, that someone could come and say, you need to change your hair or we're going to let you go. That's not acceptable on no level. And so, so we're going to be looking at what are we working with here? What are we working with in Michigan that are keeping people from being able to have access to housing, access to credit, get out of that hamster wheel of the high interest rate loans, payday lending, and all those types of things.
Now, I know that you are passionate about economic injustices, especially when it comes to Black and Brown communities. Can you talk a little bit more about why you are so passionate about that issue?
Well, growing up in Pontiac, in the inner cities of Pontiac, and just watching my mother having to work 3 and 4 jobs, raising us. My mother was like, I don't know, 44 or 45 years old when she got hired in at GM. People in their 40s at GM have already been there about 20 plus years. And she was just starting out. And so watching the struggle of people just trying to provide for their families. And then as I've been in the financial industry for over 30 plus years, seeing that there's still a great need in our community for housing disparities that we have in our communities. How can we address those things? How can we address people being able to provide for their families? And luckily in this community we have great resources that can help people in their time of need, their time of struggle, like food pantries and things like that. But how can we start to get people access to better school opportunities? We see in our communities where you'll have in the suburbs, you'll have newer schools, but in your inner cities, you have old schools and sometimes crumbling. It's how can we address those things where people can start out I just read somewhere where there's the differences in the books that are you can have the same book in a suburb school, and then in an inner city school, that same book, it's quite a bit smaller than the one that's in the suburb. That means there's less information in the book in the inner city. So there's like systematic systems at play that are keeping people from even just getting basic education at a high school level. So we've got some work to do in our communities and just raising that level of awareness, so that, when I do my D&I conversations at work, I always start out with a quote from Benjamin Franklin that says, "Justice will not be served until those unaffected are as outraged as those that are." And that's what this awareness is about, getting people that are unaffected by these injustices to get outraged. But they can't get outraged. Our allies, we got white people that want to be our allies. They can't get outraged by this because they don't know. But so that's part of this is this education process of helping educate them on what's going on, and so that they can get outraged and help us, because they've got the resources and the privilege and the power to help us get this thing solved.
Will you be working with other groups or organizations across the state of Michigan to tackle some of these racial injustices that you have been talking about, like the NAACP, for example?
I would like to think that part of our work will be certainly reaching out to organizations that can provide, we're going to be digging into numbers and data and things like that. And so I'm sure we're going to be needing to partner with organizations that can help us identify some of those things that we're going to need to do. But we're going to, I'm getting ahead of the curve because we haven't had our first meeting yet. I haven't even met my other fellow council people yet. And so, but I'm thinking that that's probably part of it, is anytime you're trying to make a change in anything, you've got to be willing to reach out to other people, organizations, the community, to help get you some of the information that you need to arm yourself with to make a positive impact, positive change. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Now, you talked a little bit about um, having your allies be just as outraged as the people who are discriminated against. What type of things or what type of suggestions would you make so that people can educate themselves so that they can see how discrimination affects people other than them?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And it really does start out with education. So, easy to like reach out to a Black person that you know. So for our white allies, reach out to Black people that you know, that you work with. Um, and just start to ask questions. Google, I mean, you can almost Google anything nowadays, but you have to get some education, start to, read books on, some of the things. And sometimes you have to go back, read about the Reconstruction in America and start to kind of learn some of the history of why some of these things are so ingrained in our laws and our policies and practices, and why people are fighting against it. So why people, I mean, that begs a question, right, of why there's a certain segment of our population that wants to hang on to some of those things that are very harmful to communities of color. And so it begs a question, why? And so just, I think people have to educate themselves. We can educate you to a degree, but there's a wealth of information out there that people are just going to have to start to dig in. If they say that they really care about their fellow man, that they're going to have to arm themselves with some knowledge so that they can kind of just help in the fight against all of these injustices. So education is the key, is definitely the power.
How has your involvement in the study committee for the City of East Lansing Independent Police Oversight Commission and Commissioner for the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Commission of Mid-Michigan influenced your activism?
I think, as I was talking about earlier, just the being racially profiled, you get tired of it. You just get kind of fatigued by it, right? And so when I hear or when I read, sometimes you'll see things come up in your social media feed, and there'll be videos of someone that is being stopped by the police and harassed or what have you. And people will say in the comments, if they would have only complied, they wouldn't have gotten beaten up, or it wouldn't have gone this way, or blah, 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 blah. Well, George Floyd had the police called on him for a nonviolent act. And as we saw in the video, he was no threat. And so complying is not always the answer to keep you safe. And so what's going to keep you safe is the people that are to protect and to serve us understand that they've got to figure out a better way of, when they get called to a scene, especially for a nonviolent crime, they should be coming to de-escalate a situation, yet they come and escalate it. And so there's that education piece. And so that's what has called me to that commission, that oversight for the East Lansing Police is, how can we get systems change, get them to see things different, get them to see us as human beings, and not just see us automatically as the enemy when they see us. When you talked about earlier, it just came to my mind of what some of the things I would like to see done. I think about, I think it takes 500 to 600 hours the state of Michigan requires for our police officers to be able to carry a badge and a gun. Well, my sister-in-law, who owns a hair salon, I think it took her 1,300 hours to get her cosmetology license. I think it's now 1,500 hours to get a cosmetology license in the state of Michigan. Why does it cost or take more time for me to learn how to perm somebody's hair or, you know, cut their hair? And it takes less time than that for somebody to carry a gun and a badge. That's crazy. I mean, so those are some of the things that, you know, we need to be like having conversation around. How can we address that? You know, 500 hours? Really? I mean, so those are the kind of the things that we've got to start thinking about as a society. But again, until we know better, we can't do better, right? And so the education, again, is so vital to this.
And lastly, you are a part of multiple organizations and commissions. How do you plan on juggling all of those things?
That's a really good question. I was having that conversation just about an hour ago as I had started the application process for my master's degree at MSU. I was like, so I finally told the guy, I said, I don't know, maybe I'm biting off more than I can chew, you know, as far as trying to go and get my master's right now. And so it's going to be time management, right? And really prioritizing and I'll just have to have a lot of prayer for God to, you know, help guide me through the work. But the work is important and it has to get done. And luckily for me, I have a really supportive husband. And so it'll all be good. But I did have to like step back from the degree. I'm like, okay, I better not do that.
If I could ask, what did you want to pursue a master's degree in?
So I was looking at the leadership and strategic planning. So kind of like along the lines of organizational development. And so just being a lifelong learner, you know, just kind of learning more but I don't know, maybe my ship has sailed on that part as far as getting a master's degree. I'm getting educated a lot right here in life on with the diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, and now with the Black Leadership Advisory Council. And so I'm going to have to, that's going to be my street cred, I guess, for my master's.
Well, I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to talk to me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Kelli Etchison, for joining me today for this interview. You can read the full article on HOMTV.net. Thanks for joining us.